Every morning, as dew settles on garden leaves and dawn light filters through trees, millions of intricate structures appear like crystalline architecture suspended in midair. You've walked through them. You've swept them away. You've probably never given them much thought. But what if these everyday constructions contain engineering principles that challenge everything we know about materials science? A single strand thinner than a human hair can stop an insect traveling at full flight speed. An orb less than 2 feet wide can withstand forces that would shatter steel of the same weight. And the creature building these structures possesses no blueprint, no measuring tools, no conscious understanding of physics, yet constructs with a precision that puts our finest engineers to shame. How does something so delicate hold such power? Why do physicists study spider silk more intensely than almost any synthetic fiber? And what secrets lie hidden in the mathematics of a simple garden web? The answers might change how you see the natural world forever, and possibly change the future of human technology too. Let's start with a problem that seems impossible. You need to create a material that must be incredibly strong enough to capture prey traveling at high speed. It must be extraordinarily elastic, able to stretch without breaking when impact occurs. It must be lighter than almost anything imaginable. And you have to manufacture it at room temperature, using only water and the proteins you can synthesize yourself. This is the challenge every orb-weaving spider solves every single day. Spider dragline silk, the primary structural thread used to build web frameworks, has a tensile strength of approximately 1.1 gigapascals. To understand what this means, consider that high-grade steel also measures around 1 to 2 gigapascals. But here's where the comparison becomes startling. Steel is roughly 6 times denser than spider silk. On a weight-to-weight basis, spider silk is 5 times stronger than steel. The numbers grow more impressive when we examine toughness, the total energy a material can absorb before breaking. Spider dragline silk can absorb about 180 megajoules per cubic meter before failure. Kevlar, the synthetic fiber used in bulletproof vests, absorbs only 50 megajoules per cubic meter. Spider silk is roughly 3 times tougher than Kevlar. But raw strength tells only part of the story. What makes spider silk truly extraordinary is its elasticity. While Kevlar and carbon fiber are incredibly strong, they break almost immediately when stretched beyond 1% of their length. Spider dragline silk can extend by 27% before breaking. Some spider silk types can stretch up to 270%, nearly 3 times their original length, before snapping. This combination of properties, high strength, extreme elasticity, and remarkable toughness, creates a material that evolutionary biologists describe as one of the finest examples of natural optimization. No synthetic material we have created achieves the same balance of characteristics. How does spider silk accomplish this feat? The answer lies in its molecular architecture. Spider silk proteins, called spidroins, contain long chains of amino acids arranged in a highly specific pattern. About 50% of these proteins consist of just 2 amino acids, glycine and alanine. These are the smallest amino acids, allowing them to pack together extremely tightly. Within the silk fiber, these proteins organize into 2 distinct regions. Crystalline zones form rigid structures where protein chains align in beta sheet configurations, bonded together by hydrogen bonds. These crystalline regions provide the silk's tensile strength. Between these crystalline zones lie amorphous regions, disordered areas where proteins form flexible helical and turn structures. These amorphous regions provide elasticity. Think of this arrangement as a biological composite material. Engineers create composites by combining materials with different properties, like fiberglass, which bonds brittle glass fibers with flexible resin. The result is tougher than either component alone. Spider silk uses the same principle at the molecular level. The rigid crystalline regions anchor the structure and prevent catastrophic failure, while the flexible amorphous regions absorb energy and allow the material to deform without breaking. When stress is applied to spider silk, the flexible regions stretch first. As tension increases, these amorphous zones gradually extend, converting kinetic energy into heat and preventing the silk from acting like a rigid rod. Eventually, if enough force is applied, the crystalline regions themselves begin to deform and finally break. This progressive failure mechanism is what gives spider silk its legendary toughness. But different silk strands have different properties depending on their function. Orb-weaving spiders produce up to 7 different types of silk, each optimized for specific tasks. The frame of the web uses major ampelid silk, strong and relatively stiff, providing structural support. The capture spiral uses flagelliform silk, extremely elastic and coated with sticky droplets, perfect for absorbing the impact of flying insects. Wrapping silk used to immobilize prey is different again, tough but less elastic. Even the attachment points where silk anchors to surfaces use a specialized cement-like silk with unique adhesive properties. Each silk type has a different ratio of crystalline to amorphous regions, different protein compositions, and different mechanical properties. The spider adjusts these properties not through conscious choice, but through millions of years of evolutionary refinement encoded in its genes. Scientists have measured silk from over 160 spider species, documenting tensile strengths ranging from 0.45 to 2.0 gigapascals. The toughest silk ever measured comes from Darwin's bark spider, a species from Madagascar. Its dragline silk achieves an average toughness of 350 megajoules per cubic meter, with some samples reaching 520 megajoules per cubic meter, roughly 10 times tougher than Kevlar and twice as tough as any other known spider silk. And here's perhaps the most remarkable aspect. Spiders produce this material at room temperature in an aqueous solution, using no harsh chemicals or high-energy processes. Contrast this with steel production, which requires blast furnaces reaching temperatures above 1,500 degrees Celsius, or synthetic fiber manufacturing, which relies on petroleum-derived chemicals and energy-intensive processing. The spider accomplishes all of this in specialized glands within its abdomen, where proteins are stored in liquid form at precise pH levels. As the liquid silk passes through the spinning duct to the spinnerets, the spider's silk-producing organs, it experiences carefully controlled changes in acidity, ion concentration, and mechanical pulling forces. These changes trigger the proteins to crystallize and align, forming the final solid fiber. This spinning process occurs so efficiently that it's become a major focus of materials science research. If humans could replicate this process, we could manufacture high-performance fibers with minimal energy input and no toxic waste products. The silk proteins themselves are inherently biodegradable, composed of common elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, with water as the only byproduct of protein synthesis. Nature has handed us a blueprint for sustainable manufacturing that works at room temperature, uses renewable resources, and produces no pollution. We're only beginning to understand how to read that blueprint. A spider begins building an orb web with no measurements, no straight edge, no compass. Yet, within a few hours, a near-perfect geometric pattern emerges. Radial threads spaced at regular angles, spiral threads maintaining consistent spacing, the entire structure balanced and centered. How does an animal with a brain smaller than a pinhead execute architectural precision that rivals human engineering? The construction process follows a remarkably consistent pattern across different orb-weaving species, suggesting this behavior has ancient evolutionary roots. The spider begins by exploring its environment, using its legs to measure distances and assess structural stability. It then releases a silk thread into the air, allowing wind currents to carry this bridge line until it catches on a distant anchor point. Once the bridge line is secured, the spider reinforces it by traveling back and forth, laying additional strands until the line can support the spider's weight. This becomes the first structural element, the foundation from which everything else will grow. Next comes the frame. The spider moves along the bridge line to approximately the midpoint, then drops downward while releasing silk. This creates a Y-shaped structure, the initial scaffolding. The spider adds more radial threads, working outward from this central point, creating a spoke-like pattern. As it adds each new radius, it uses its legs to measure the angle to adjacent radii, maintaining relatively consistent spacing. Research using infrared cameras and neural networks to track spider movements during construction reveals that spiders use their legs as measuring instruments. By detecting the angle between bent leg joints and keeping that angle constant as they move, spiders maintain consistent spacing between radii without any external reference points. The hub, the central platform where radii converge, forms next. Most orb weavers don't anchor every radius at exactly the same central point. Instead, they create a small platform of overlapping threads, which serves as a waiting station and provides structural stability. Now comes one of the most sophisticated parts of web construction, the auxiliary spiral. The spider moves outward from the hub, laying down a temporary spiral with wide spacing. This auxiliary spiral serves as scaffolding. It holds the radial threads in position and provides a pathway the spider can walk on while building the final capture spiral. The capture spiral is where physics and biology intersect in fascinating ways. Starting from the outer edge and working inward, the spider lays down the sticky spiral thread that will actually catch prey. As it moves, it simultaneously removes the auxiliary spiral, recycling those threads by eating them. The spacing of capture spiral loops is remarkably consistent within individual webs. Studies show that spiders measure this spacing by using their legs to detect distance. Typically, one leg holds the previous loop, while another leg finds the position for the next loop. This biomechanical measuring system allows for precise spacing without any cognitive calculation. But what determines the exact spacing? Research on garden cross spiders shows that environmental factors influence web geometry. When temperature drops from 24 to 12 degrees Celsius, spiders build capture spirals with fewer, more widely spaced loops, conserving silk in colder conditions when metabolic processes are slower. When wind speed increases to just 0.5 meters per second during construction, spiders build smaller, rounder webs with greater spacing between capture spiral meshes, adapting the design to withstand mechanical stress. Humidity affects web construction too. At lower humidity levels, spiders create smaller webs with fewer spiral loops, but maintain consistent spacing. When humidity increases, web size expands, but spiders achieve this by spacing loops farther apart rather than adding more loops. The spider's silk glands appear to have finite production capacity, and the architecture adapts to maximize coverage with available resources. The geometry of orb webs isn't arbitrary, it's optimized for specific mechanical functions. The radial threads bear most of the web's structural load. They're made from stiff, strong major ampulate silk and are under high tension, pre-stressed like the cables of a suspension bridge. This pre-stress serves multiple purposes. It keeps the web taut, enables rapid vibration transmission when prey strikes, and allows the web to deform predictably under load. The capture spiral uses flagelliform silk, much more elastic than radial silk, and coated with aqueous glue droplets containing hygroscopic compounds. These droplets keep the spiral moist and sticky while also providing additional elasticity. When prey impacts the web, these spiral threads stretch dramatically, absorbing kinetic energy and preventing the insect from bouncing back out. But here's something remarkable that researchers discovered through computer modeling and physical testing. The web's ability to absorb impact isn't just about material properties. The architecture itself matters enormously. When prey hits an orb web, the initial impact causes the entire structure to deform. The sticky spiral threads at the impact point stretch and engage first. As they extend, they stiffen, a property of the silk's nonlinear elastic response. This stiffening means that only the threads directly under stress continue to stretch, while other parts of the web remain stable. As force increases, these highly stressed threads eventually break, but only at the impact point. Scientists at MIT tested this by physically pulling on spider webs in the field. Regardless of where they pulled, the web always failed at exactly that location. No cascading collapse, no propagation of damage. The failure remains localized. This flaw tolerance is extraordinary. Most engineered structures fail catastrophically when damage occurs. Think of how a crack in glass propagates rapidly across the entire pane. Spider webs contain the damage. A web with a hole from a previous capture or environmental damage remains functional because the localized failure doesn't compromise the rest of the structure. Computer simulations comparing orb webs made from different materials show that spider silk's nonlinear response, initially soft then increasingly stiff under load, is crucial for this localized failure mechanism. Materials with linear elastic responses cause damage to propagate across wider areas of the web. The silk's unusual mechanical properties aren't just about strength. They're about controlled, predictable failure that preserves the overall structure. Wind presents another challenge. Strong winds could destroy webs, but orb weavers have evolved multiple strategies to handle this threat. The initial stiffness of dragline silk allows webs to survive winds approaching hurricane strength before tearing. Some species orient their webs to align with prevailing winds, reducing cross-sectional area. Others build in more sheltered locations or reinforce their webs with additional radial threads. What about the secondary frame? A structural feature many observers miss. In some orb webs, the outermost radial threads don't connect directly to anchor points. Instead, they attach to an intermediate frame thread, which then connects to the actual anchor. This secondary frame prevents radial threads from being too closely aligned with anchor points, which would create stress concentrations and premature failure. It's an elegant solution that distributes mechanical loads more evenly across the structure. The mathematics underlying orb web geometry has inspired materials scientists and engineers. The combination of radial and spiral elements creates a structure that's simultaneously strong, lightweight, and damage-resistant. Some researchers are exploring biomimetic designs based on spiderweb architecture for applications ranging from suspension bridge designs to damage-resistant composite materials for aircraft. Recent three-dimensional scanning and modeling of spiderwebs during construction reveals another fascinating aspect. Spiders don't build linearly. Most of the web's foundational geometry is established within the first 2 days of construction. After that, the spider primarily reinforces existing structures rather than expanding the framework. Web density can increase by 700% between day 0 and day 1, then 400% between day 1 and day 2, but only 9% between day 2 and day 3. The spider appears to establish the architecture first, then strengthen it. This construction strategy makes evolutionary sense. A functional web is needed quickly for prey capture, but continued investment in reinforcement improves longevity and performance without requiring the spider to start over. Different spider species show remarkable variation in web building strategies. Some species create webs with missing sectors, deliberate gaps in the spiral pattern connected by a single signal thread. Some build three-dimensional tangle webs rather than flat orbs. Some construct funnel-shaped structures. Each design represents a different solution to the same fundamental problem: how to build an effective prey trap with limited material and energy resources. The orb web you see in your garden represents millions of years of evolutionary optimization, executed by an animal that has no understanding of physics, geometry, or engineering. Yet, the spider creates a structure that works efficiently, repeatedly, and with remarkable consistency. That's the power of evolution as an engineer. Not through conscious design, but through countless generations of trial and error, selection pressure has refined web architecture to near-optimal solutions. The spiders alive today are descendants of the ones whose webs worked best. And the webs that work best are the ones that follow the laws of physics most effectively. You're standing in your garden, admiring an orb web glistening in morning light. What you're looking at is a trap for flying insects, but what you can't see, what scientists only recently discovered, is that you're also looking at one of nature's most sophisticated acoustic sensors. The web is listening. In 2022, researchers made a startling discovery. Orb-weaving spiders can detect airborne sound through their webs, not just vibrations from prey directly contacting the silk, but actual acoustic signals traveling through the air. The web functions as an outsourced ear, an extended sensory organ that captures sound-induced air particle movements with extraordinary sensitivity. When acoustic waves travel through air, they cause air particles to oscillate back and forth. These particle velocity changes are what the web detects. When researchers played tones at various frequencies near spider webs, the silk threads moved in response, and the spiders responded with defensive behaviors. The web's response to airborne sound is remarkably efficient. At certain frequencies, particularly around 200 Hz, the web tracks air particle motion with nearly perfect fidelity, meaning the web's velocity matches the air's velocity almost 1-to-1. This response efficiency exceeds that of all previously known eardrums in the animal kingdom. How sensitive is this acoustic detection? Spiders responded to sound levels as low as 68 decibels at a distance of 3 meters, roughly equivalent to normal conversational speech. Based on this sensitivity, researchers calculated that the web-enabled hearing system could detect potential predators or prey at distances exceeding 10 meters. For a creature that might be only a centimeter long, this represents an enormous expansion of sensory awareness. But acoustic detection is only part of the web's sensory function. The primary information channel remains direct vibration, the signals generated when prey strikes the web or struggles after capture. Spiders detect these vibrations through specialized organs called lyriform slits and sela, located primarily on their legs. These sensors are extraordinarily sensitive, capable of detecting mechanical compressions as small as 1.4 nanometers, roughly 1/100th the width of a human hair. This makes spiders the second most vibration-sensitive organism known, surpassed only by cockroaches. Each spider leg contains arrays of these slit organs, with different slits having different sensitivities. This range fractionation allows spiders to detect vibrations across a huge amplitude range, from the faintest tremor to violent struggling. The arrays function somewhat like the hair cells in human ears, where different cells respond to different sound frequencies and intensities. When prey impacts the web, it generates both transverse waves, vibrations perpendicular to the silk strand, and longitudinal waves, vibrations parallel to the strand. These wave types travel at different speeds through the silk, with longitudinal waves moving roughly 10 times faster than transverse waves. The spider's nervous system can distinguish between these wave types, using them to extract different kinds of information. Longitudinal waves appear to provide directional information. Because they travel faster and dissipate less than transverse waves, they arrive at the spider's position first and carry information about the direction to the vibration source. Transverse waves provide information about vibration amplitude and frequency content, clues about what caused the vibration. The spider typically waits at the web's hub with its legs positioned on different radial threads, creating a distributed sensing array. When vibrations arrive, they reach the spider's different legs at slightly different times and with different amplitudes. By comparing these signals across its 8 legs, the spider can triangulate the vibration source's location. The timing differences are incredibly small. Researchers have measured that spiders can detect time differences between vibration arrivals of just 2 to 4 milliseconds. Given the speed of vibration propagation through silk and typical web dimensions, this temporal resolution is sufficient to locate prey with remarkable precision. But here's where web architecture becomes crucial again. The tension in radial threads affects how quickly vibrations travel along them. Higher tension means faster wave propagation. If all radial threads had uniform tension, the time differences in vibration arrival would be larger and more easily detected. But orb webs don't have uniform tension. The capture spiral connects to the radii and alters their tension distribution. Researchers studying this phenomenon found that the capture spiral creates a tension gradient along each radius. The tension is highest near the hub and decreases toward the web's periphery. This tension gradient causes vibrations from different locations to arrive at the hub with very small time differences. So small that they fall below the spider's temporal resolution threshold. Why would evolution create a web design that makes temporal localization more difficult? The answer appears to be that spiders rely primarily on amplitude differences between legs rather than timing differences. By comparing which legs experience the strongest vibrations, the spider can determine direction. The tension distribution created by the capture spiral actually helps optimize amplitude-based localization while also serving its primary function of prey retention. Recent research using modal analysis, a technique from structural engineering, suggests that spiders might use an even more sophisticated detection method. The web has natural vibration modes, patterns of movement where different parts of the web oscillate with specific frequency relationships, like the modes of a drumhead or violin string. When prey impacts the web, it excites these vibrational modes in specific combinations that depend on impact location. A spider capable of sensing these modal patterns, detecting how different parts of the web vibrate at different frequencies, could potentially determine prey location from the mode signature alone, without needing to compare timing or amplitude across legs. Computer models show this modal detection method would be remarkably effective and robust. We don't yet know if spiders actually use modal detection, but the physics suggests it's possible. Given that evolution tends to exploit available physical phenomena, and given spiders' extraordinary vibration sensitivity, it wouldn't be surprising if this mechanism exists. The frequency content of vibrations also matters for prey discrimination. Flying insects struggling in a web generate vibration frequencies typically between 30 and 600 Hz, with specific patterns that differ between insect types. Wind-caused vibrations tend to be lower in frequency. Predatory wasps approaching a web create vibration patterns different from trapped prey. By analyzing frequency content, spiders can distinguish between food sources, environmental noise, and threats. Some species use vibrations for communication. Male spiders approaching a female's web must signal their identity carefully. Otherwise, they risk being mistaken for prey. Males of many species pluck the web's threads in species-specific rhythmic patterns, essentially playing a courtship song through the web's acoustic properties. Spider silk can vibrate across an extraordinarily wide frequency range. While most biological materials and synthetic fibers have relatively narrow optimal frequency ranges, like violin strings tuned to specific notes, spider silk can effectively transmit vibrations from near 0 Hz up to tens of kilohertz. This wide bandwidth is crucial for detecting the diverse vibration signatures that different prey types and environmental conditions produce. Researchers studying this property found that spiders actively control their web's vibrational characteristics by adjusting silk tension, bouncing up and down on the web, or plucking individual strands. Spiders can generate both transverse and longitudinal waves and potentially tune the web's frequency response. This is active sensing, similar to how echolocating bats adjust their call frequencies. The implications extend beyond biology. Engineers are now studying spiderweb acoustics for applications in sensor technology, a material that can detect minute vibrations across a wide frequency range, that functions at room temperature and that can be produced sustainably, has obvious applications in microphones, vibration sensors, and fluid dynamic measurement devices. Some researchers are exploring whether spider silk could be used in biomedical sensing applications, detecting blood flow patterns, for instance, or monitoring subtle vibrations in biological tissues. The combination of biocompatibility, sensitivity, and broad frequency response makes spider silk an intriguing candidate for such applications. What we're learning is that the spiderweb isn't just a passive trap. It's an active sensory organ that extends the spider's perceptual world far beyond its body. The web is simultaneously a structure, a tool, and a sense organ, a remarkable example of how evolution can create multifunctional systems that serve multiple purposes through a single integrated design. When you see a spider sitting motionless at the center of its web, it isn't resting. It's listening through 8 legs to an intricate vibration landscape, processing information about everything touching or approaching its web, ready to respond in milliseconds to prey capture opportunities or threats. The stillness conceals constant sensory vigilance. The web has become an extension of the spider's nervous system, a sensory net cast across space, gathering information from a volume hundreds of times larger than the spider's body. This is extended phenotype in action, genes expressing themselves not just in body structure, but in environmental modifications that enhance survival. And the spider hears the world through silk. A garden spider begins building its web at dusk. The temperature is dropping, humidity is rising as night approaches, and a gentle breeze moves through the vegetation. These environmental conditions aren't background noise. They're active participants in the web-building process, influencing every decision the spider makes. Spider silk is not a static material. Its mechanical properties shift dramatically with environmental conditions, particularly humidity and temperature. Understanding this environmental sensitivity is crucial to understanding how spiderwebs actually function in nature. Let's start with humidity. Spider dragline silk contains both crystalline and amorphous regions, as we discussed earlier. The amorphous regions are particularly sensitive to water. Water molecules act as plasticizers, inserting themselves between protein chains and reducing the forces holding those chains together. This makes the silk more flexible and extensible. When humidity increases, spider silk undergoes supercontraction. It shrinks in length by up to 50%. If free to contract, or if restrained, generates significant tension. At the same time, the silk becomes softer and more elastic. Breaking strain increases linearly with relative humidity. Following the relationship, breaking strain percentage equals 0.29 times relative humidity plus 13.1%. This predicts that dragline silk can extend from 13% at zero humidity to about 42% at full humidity before breaking. Meanwhile, elastic modulus, a measure of stiffness, decreases with humidity. At low humidity, spider silk can have an elastic modulus around 17 gigapascals, making it quite stiff. In completely wet conditions, the initial stiffness nearly vanishes, and the silk behaves more like rubber. Why does this matter? Because orb webs often span vegetation near water sources, where insects are abundant. Morning dew deposits water droplets across the web. Rain soaks the silk thoroughly. These moisture changes alter the web's mechanical behavior dramatically. Recent computational modeling of web performance under different humidity conditions revealed fascinating results. At low humidity, the web becomes stiff and brittle. When simulated prey impacts such webs, they capture the projectile effectively, but with high stress concentrations. At high humidity, the web becomes soft and extensible. Impact causes more deformation. The web stretches more, but stress is distributed more evenly, reducing the likelihood of thread breakage. The researchers found that moderate humidity provides optimal performance, enough stiffness to restrain prey effectively, enough elasticity to absorb impact without breaking. But perhaps more importantly, they found that spiders appear to adjust their web architecture based on the humidity conditions they typically experience. Species in humid environments build webs optimized for high moisture levels, while species in arid regions build differently. This suggests that web design has been fine-tuned by evolution to match environmental conditions. The same species building in different humidity regimes shows behavioral plasticity, adjusting web parameters to maintain functionality across varying moisture levels. Temperature affects silk properties too, though differently than humidity. Higher temperatures generally make silk slightly softer and less stiff, while lower temperatures increase stiffness. The effects aren't as dramatic as humidity effects, but they're significant enough to influence web performance. Researchers studying garden cross spiders found that when temperature dropped from 24 to 12 degrees Celsius during web construction, the spiders built capture spirals with fewer, more widely spaced meshes. The overall capture area didn't change significantly, but silk use decreased. This conservation strategy makes sense. Silk production is metabolically expensive, and cold conditions slow metabolism. By spacing loops farther apart, the spider maintains web functionality while reducing material cost. Wind introduces mechanical challenges. Even moderate winds can damage webs or prevent their construction entirely. Laboratory studies show that wind speeds as low as 0.5 meters per second cause spiders to build smaller, rounder webs with wider spiral spacing. The reduced size lowers wind resistance, while rounder geometry distributes wind forces more evenly. Wider spiral spacing conserves silk in conditions where web damage is likely. But here's something surprising. When researchers studied spiders in natural field conditions with significant wind exposure, they found some species showed no web modification compared to sheltered sites. The wind speeds in exposed locations were high enough that laboratory studies would predict major architectural changes, yet field webs showed normal geometry. This apparent contradiction highlights the complexity of environmental adaptation. In the laboratory, spiders experience wind during construction and respond to that immediate stressor. In natural settings, spiders may select building locations based on long-term wind patterns, choosing sites where local topology provides wind protection even in exposed habitats, or they may assess wind conditions before beginning construction and decide whether conditions are suitable, a decision that can't be observed in laboratory studies where building sites are predetermined. The interaction between web architecture and environmental forces becomes especially intriguing when we consider that webs often last for days or even weeks. A web built during calm conditions at dusk must survive afternoon thunderstorms, morning dew, temperature swings between day and night, and variable wind patterns. The architecture must be robust across this range of conditions. Some species deal with this challenge by rebuilding webs daily. Orb weavers often construct a new web each evening, consuming the old web and recycling its proteins. This daily reconstruction might seem wasteful, but it ensures the web remains in optimal condition. Damaged threads are replaced, sticky droplets are refreshed, and the overall structure maintains its effectiveness. Other species build more permanent webs and repair them as needed. Sheet web weavers, for instance, create non-sticky platforms that can last for weeks. Damage is patched rather than requiring complete reconstruction. The trade-off is between construction cost and maintenance cost. Different species have evolved different solutions. Climate change presents new challenges for spider populations. As temperature and humidity patterns shift, as extreme weather events become more frequent, web-building spiders must adapt. Some research suggests spiders show considerable behavioral plasticity. They can adjust web parameters in response to changing conditions. But there are limits to plasticity. Studies modeling web performance under projected climate scenarios for various regions show concerning results. In some scenarios, projected combinations of high temperature and low humidity would significantly reduce web toughness and prey capture effectiveness. Whether spiders can adapt quickly enough to these changing conditions remains an open question. Spider populations serve as indicators of ecosystem health, partly because they're sensitive to environmental conditions. Changes in web abundance, web architecture, or spider distribution can signal broader environmental changes. Monitoring these populations provides ecologists with valuable data about how ecosystems respond to climate variation. But it's worth noting that spiders have survived dramatic climate changes over millions of years of evolution. They're found in virtually every terrestrial ecosystem, from deserts to rainforests, from sea level to high mountains. This suggests considerable adaptive capacity. The question is whether adaptation can occur fast enough to match current rates of environmental change. One factor in spiders' favor is their short generation time. Many species complete their life cycle in 1 year or less, allowing rapid selection for beneficial traits. If web-building behaviors have sufficient genetic variation, and if environmental changes create strong selection pressure, evolution could occur relatively quickly. Laboratory selection experiments have shown that spider silk properties and web-building behaviors can change within just a few generations under strong artificial selection. This suggests the genetic variation needed for adaptation exists. Whether natural selection in the wild will be fast enough remains to be seen. What's clear is that spider webs and the environments they inhabit are deeply interconnected. The web isn't just placed in the environment, it responds to environmental conditions, adapts to them, and in some ways shapes them. The silk captures dew and creates microclimates. The web structure influences local airflow patterns. These small-scale environmental modifications can matter for the spider's prey capture success and survival. And all of this environmental sensitivity and adaptation happens without conscious planning. The spider doesn't understand humidity gradients or thermal physics. It simply builds according to instinctive patterns refined by evolution. Those instinctive patterns encode in behavioral form solutions to physical problems that human engineers struggle with, even using advanced computational tools. Every web you encounter is a structure tuned to its environmental context, built by an animal responding to immediate conditions while carrying genetic instructions written by millions of years of ancestral experience. The web exists at the intersection of physics, biology, and environmental science, a tiny structure that connects multiple disciplines. Here's a problem that might seem insurmountable. You need to manufacture about 20 meters of high-performance fiber every single day, but your food supply is unpredictable. Some days you catch several meals, other days, nothing. Yet you can't stop building. Your survival depends on maintaining your web. How do orb-weaving spiders solve this resource management challenge? With one of nature's most efficient recycling programs. When an orb weaver dismantles its web, it doesn't discard the silk, it eats it. The protein chains that made up yesterday's web become tomorrow's web. Through digestion, the spider breaks down silk proteins into constituent amino acids, which travel to the silk glands where they're reassembled into new silk. This recycling process is remarkably efficient. Studies estimate that spiders can reclaim up to 95% of the amino acids from recycled silk. Very little of the protein is lost to metabolic overhead. This means a spider can continue building functional webs even during periods when it catches little or no prey. The behavior is widespread among orb weavers. Many species systematically consume their capture spiral each morning, leaving only the structural frame and radial threads. The sticky capture silk becomes ineffective after about 24 hours as dust and pollen contaminate the glue droplets, so recycling and rebuilding makes sense. Some species consume the entire web. Others are more selective, eating only damaged or contaminated sections. A few species don't consume their webs at all, but simply abandon them. These variations reflect different cost-benefit calculations, depending on the species' ecology and life history. For species that do recycle, the energy savings are substantial. Manufacturing silk proteins requires energy. Estimates suggest that producing silk for a complete web consumes roughly 1% of a spider's daily energy budget. That might not sound like much, but for a small animal with high metabolic demands, every percentage point matters. By recycling, the spider reduces the energy cost of web building by roughly 90% compared to synthesizing all new proteins. There's also a material scarcity issue. Silk proteins are rich in specific amino acids, particularly alanine and glycine. These amino acids must come from the spider's diet, primarily insect prey. If prey is scarce, the amino acid supply becomes limiting. Recycling provides a buffer against scarcity, allowing continued web building even when external protein sources are unavailable. This creates an interesting evolutionary dynamic. Spiders that can efficiently recycle silk have a competitive advantage during lean periods. They can maintain functional webs when other spiders might be unable to build. This selection pressure likely drove the evolution of silk recycling behaviors and the physiological mechanisms supporting it. The digestive and metabolic pathways that make this recycling possible represent significant evolutionary adaptations. The spider's digestive system must break down silk proteins efficiently, which isn't trivial given their fibrous, crystalline structure. The silk glands must have mechanisms to take up amino acids from circulation and incorporate them into new silk protein synthesis. These systems work together to close the material loop, but silk recycling is just one aspect of spiders' efficient resource use. The silk production system itself represents a marvel of biochemical engineering. Silk proteins are stored in liquid form within the glands at concentrations around 30 to 50% by weight. This is an extremely high protein concentration, far higher than most biological fluids. Maintaining proteins at this concentration without precipitation requires precise control of pH, ion concentrations, and protein structure. The storage solution contains specific ions and molecules that keep the protein soluble and prevent premature crystallization. As the silk solution moves through the spinning duct toward the spinnerets, it experiences carefully orchestrated changes. The pH shifts from neutral to acidic. Sodium and chloride ion concentrations change. These chemical shifts trigger conformational changes in the proteins, causing them to begin crystallizing and aligning. Simultaneously, the silk experiences mechanical forces. The walls of the spinning duct appear to apply shear forces to the liquid, aligning protein molecules. The exit nozzle narrows, increasing the alignment forces. As the spider pulls on the silk, tensile forces further align the proteins and promote crystallization. The result is a solid fiber that forms at room temperature from aqueous solution, with final properties determined by the process conditions. This spinning process is the key to silk's remarkable properties. The same proteins formed under different conditions produce silk with different mechanical characteristics. Humans have attempted to replicate this spinning process for decades, with limited success. We can now genetically engineer bacteria, yeast, or even plants to produce spider silk proteins. Getting the proteins isn't the bottleneck anymore. The challenge is spinning them into fibers with properties comparable to natural silk. The problem is that simply extruding silk proteins through a nozzle doesn't recreate the complex chemical and mechanical conditions inside the spider's spinning duct. Early attempts at artificial spinning produced fibers that were only about half as strong as natural dragline silk and lacked the characteristic toughness. Recent advances have brought us closer. By carefully controlling pH gradients, ion concentrations, pulling speeds, and nozzle geometry, researchers have produced synthetic spider silk fibers with mechanical properties approaching those of natural silk. Some lab-produced fibers now achieve tensile strengths around 1 gigapascal and show the nonlinear elastic response characteristic of natural silk. This progress has generated excitement in materials science and biotechnology. Companies are now producing spider silk proteins at scale for various applications. Some use bacterial fermentation, others use genetically modified silkworms, some use mammalian cell cultures. Each approach has advantages and limitations. Bacterial fermentation is efficient and scalable. Bacteria grow quickly, and fermentation technology is well established. But bacteria have limits on the size and complexity of proteins they can produce. Spider silk proteins are large, often over 250 kilodaltons, with complex, repetitive sequences. Engineering bacteria to produce full-length spider silk proteins remains challenging. Silkworms offer an elegant alternative. They already produce silk protein in large quantities, and they have the cellular machinery to handle large, complex proteins. Researchers have successfully genetically modified silkworms to produce spider silk proteins that are incorporated into the silk threads the worms naturally spin. These spider silk fibers spun by silkworms show remarkable properties, some achieving toughness 6 times greater than Kevlar. This approach is particularly promising because sericulture, silkworm farming, is already a well-established industry with centuries of accumulated knowledge. Scaling up production of spider silk from genetically modified silkworms could leverage this existing infrastructure. Another approach uses mammalian cells to produce spider silk proteins. This is more expensive and technically challenging than bacterial or insect systems, but it may be necessary for producing some silk proteins with post-translational modifications that bacteria or insects can't perform. Regardless of production method, all these approaches aim to capture what spiders do naturally, produce high-performance protein fibers at room temperature from aqueous solution with renewable inputs and minimal waste. The potential applications are vast. Spider silk is biocompatible, the human body doesn't reject it, and biodegradable. This makes it ideal for biomedical applications. Surgical sutures that dissolve after healing, tissue scaffolds for regenerative medicine, drug delivery vehicles. Some research explores using spider silk for nerve regeneration, where the silk fibers serve as guides along which nerve cells can regrow. In textiles, spider silk offers the possibility of fabrics that combine strength, elasticity, and low weight. Imagine outdoor gear that's lighter than current synthetics, but stronger and more durable. Or clothing that's comfortable, breathable, and provides excellent protection. Military applications are obvious. Body armor that's lighter and more flexible than current systems, providing equivalent or better protection. Parachute fabrics that are stronger and lighter. Tents and shelters that can be carried easily, but withstand harsh conditions. Industrial applications range from high-performance ropes and cables to composite materials for aerospace. Spider silk's strength-to-weight ratio makes it attractive anywhere weight savings matter. Aircraft components, racing car parts, lightweight structures, and there's a sustainability angle that can't be ignored. Traditional synthetic fibers like nylon and polyester are derived from petroleum. Their production is energy-intensive and generates greenhouse gas emissions. They're not biodegradable, contributing to microplastic pollution in oceans. Spider silk, being protein-based, is completely biodegradable. Production can use plant-based feedstocks, generated at room temperature with water as the main byproduct. Some estimates suggest that spider silk fiber production could be 1,000 times more energy efficient than synthetic plastic fiber production. If this technology reaches industrial scale, it could significantly reduce the environmental impact of textile and materials manufacturing. But we're not there yet. Current production costs for synthetic spider silk are high, much higher than conventional synthetic fibers. Scaling up production while maintaining fiber quality remains challenging. Consumer products made with synthetic spider silk exist but remain niche. High-end outdoor gear, luxury garments, specialized applications. The path forward requires continued research on spinning processes, genetic engineering for more efficient protein production, and industrial process development for large-scale manufacturing. Investment in this technology has increased substantially in recent years, suggesting confidence that these challenges are surmountable. Meanwhile, in gardens and forests worldwide, billions of spiders continue their daily work, building webs, catching prey, recycling silk, and solving complex materials science problems that human engineers are still learning to replicate. Every web represents a working demonstration of sustainable, efficient, high-performance manufacturing. Perhaps the greatest lesson from spider silk recycling isn't just the efficiency itself, but the principle it demonstrates. In mature ecosystems, waste is minimized. Materials cycle through use and reuse. Energy is conserved wherever possible. These aren't new ideas in ecology. They're fundamental principles of how sustainable systems operate. Spiders have been doing circular economy for 400 million years. We're just starting to learn from their example. In the rainforests of eastern Madagascar, in the Andasibe-Mantadia National Park, something extraordinary spans across rivers and streams. Bridge lines of spider silk stretch from vegetation on one bank to vegetation on the opposite side, sometimes spanning more than 25 meters. Suspended beneath these bridge lines hang orb webs up to 2.8 square meters in area, larger than a king-size bed. These are the webs of Darwin's bark spider, and they represent the extremes of what spider engineering can achieve. Darwin's bark spider was described as a new species in 2009, its discovery coinciding with the 150th anniversary of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species. The naming was deliberate tribute. These spiders showcase natural selection, producing extraordinary adaptations. The spiders themselves aren't particularly large. Females measure roughly 18 to 22 millimeters in body length. Males are even smaller at around 6 millimeters. Yet these small spiders construct the largest orb webs known to science in a habitat no other spider can exploit. The key innovation is the bridge line spanning water. Most orb-weaving spiders anchor their webs to vegetation, building where there's sufficient structure to support the web. But open water offers no anchor points in its interior. By building bridge lines across streams and rivers, Darwin's bark spider suspends its web directly above water, creating a trap position precisely where large numbers of flying insects emerge from aquatic larval stages. Researchers have documented webs containing more than 30 mayflies simultaneously. a remarkable food source for such a small predator. The web position also provides protection from many predators that hunt through vegetation but avoid water crossings. But spanning such distances requires extraordinary silk. And indeed, the silk of Darwin's bark spider is the toughest biological material ever measured. Its average toughness measures 350 megajoules per cubic meter, with some samples reaching 520 megajoules per cubic meter. This is twice as tough as any other known spider silk and roughly 10 times tougher than Kevlar. The tensile strength reaches 1.6 gigapascals, comparable to the strongest spider silks known, but not dramatically higher. What sets this silk apart is its elasticity. Darwin's bark spider silk can extend by about 65% before breaking, roughly double the extensibility of typical orb weaver dragline silk. This combination of strength and elasticity produces exceptional toughness, the ability to absorb enormous amounts of energy before failure. The molecular basis for this exceptional performance appears to involve both novel silk proteins and specialized spinning anatomy. Researchers identified a previously unknown silk protein in Darwin's bark spider called MASP4, which is unusually rich in the amino acid proline. Proline confers flexibility and extensibility, potentially explaining the silk's high elongation at break. Additionally, Darwin's bark spider has an exceptionally long silk spinning duct, the passageway where liquid silk transforms into solid fiber. A longer duct allows more extensive alignment of protein molecules, potentially contributing to the silk's superior mechanical properties. The spinning process appears to be crucial for achieving final fiber properties. How does the spider create these enormous bridge lines across water gaps? The process combines innovation with problem solving. First, the spider produces an unusually long length of bridging silk, much longer than typical bridge lines. This silk is released into the air, caught by wind currents, and carried across the water. When the silk catches on vegetation at the far side, the spider feels the change in tension and begins reinforcing the line. This initial bridge formation must happen in conditions where wind is flowing from one bank toward the other. The spider essentially waits for suitable wind conditions, then exploits them. Once the initial bridge is established, the spider adds additional reinforcement strands, building up a robust support structure capable of bearing the weight of the entire web plus captured prey. Then comes web construction. Interestingly, Darwin's bark spider uses construction behaviors not seen in other orb weavers. Rather than building the web hub as part of the initial bridge line as most orb weavers do, this species builds the hub de novo below the bridge. Additionally, the radial threads in the upper portion of the web are doubled, 2 parallel threads rather than 1, providing extra strength where stresses are highest. The result is a simplified but enormously strong web architecture. Fewer structural elements than typical orb webs, but each element is reinforced and optimized for the extreme spans involved. This represents evolutionary engineering at work. The behaviors, the silk proteins, and the anatomical features for silk spinning appear to have co-evolved together. You couldn't have one without the others. Ultra-strong silk alone wouldn't help if the spider lacked behaviors to exploit water-spanning opportunities. The behaviors wouldn't work without silk capable of supporting enormous spans. The anatomy enables the silk production, which enables the behaviors, which creates selection pressure for even better silk and anatomy. This coevolutionary process has opened an ecological niche that only Darwin's bark spider occupies. No other spider builds webs spanning open water. It's an exclusive territory, earned through evolutionary innovation. Darwin's bark spider isn't the only spider pushing the boundaries of what webs can achieve, but it represents perhaps the most dramatic example of how natural selection can optimize materials and behaviors for specific ecological opportunities. Other species hold different records. Some spiders produce finer silk, threads just 2 to 4 micrometers in diameter, thinner than a red blood cell. Some produce more specialized silks, underwater silk produced by diving bell spiders, or silk used by bolus spiders to capture moths with sticky globules swung through the air like a lasso. Each specialized silk type represents solutions to specific ecological challenges. The diversity of spider silks and web types demonstrates that there isn't one optimal solution to prey capture. Instead, there are many solutions, each effective in particular contexts. This ecological and evolutionary diversity provides researchers with a library of natural experiments. By comparing silks across species with different ecologies, scientists can understand how selection pressures shape material properties. By studying web architectures across different environments, engineers can learn principles of robust structural design. The record holders, Spiders, like Darwin's bark spider that push properties to extremes, are especially valuable because they show us the outer limits of what's possible with protein-based materials and instinctive behaviors. These species stretch the performance envelope, revealing capabilities we might otherwise think impossible. They also remind us how much remains undiscovered. Darwin's bark spider was only described in 2009, despite its dramatic webs and unique ecology. How many other remarkable species remain unknown? Spider diversity is enormous, roughly 50,000 described species, with estimates suggesting many more await discovery. Each species potentially represents novel solutions to engineering challenges. And here's something humbling. Even the species we have studied intensively still hold mysteries. We don't fully understand how spiders control silk properties during spinning. We don't know all the proteins involved in different silks. We don't understand all the sensory cues spiders use during web construction. We're still learning basic facts about spider biology. This means opportunities for discovery remain vast. Each new finding about spider silk or web construction potentially opens doors to applications we haven't imagined. The Darwin's bark spider silk, with its exceptional toughness, might enable applications that require materials to survive extreme impacts, perhaps protective gear for extreme sports, or containment systems for high-energy processes. Or consider this. If one spider species has evolved silk twice as tough as any other spider, might there be species we haven't discovered yet with even more remarkable properties? The silk of Darwin's bark spider was once considered theoretical. Many scientists thought silk couldn't be significantly tougher than what was already known. That species proved otherwise. What other theoretical limits might nature have already surpassed? The record holders teach us to expect the unexpected. Evolution has had hundreds of millions of years to experiment with spider silk proteins and web architectures. The solutions that survived, the ones we see today, represent successes from an enormous space of possibilities. Many of those successful solutions likely remain undocumented. Every new spider species described, every new silk protein characterized, every new web construction behavior documented adds to our understanding of what nature has achieved. And that understanding, in turn, guides our efforts to create new materials and technologies inspired by natural designs. The 25-meter bridge lines spanning Madagascar's rivers aren't just impressive natural structures. They're demonstrations of what's possible, proof that evolution can solve engineering problems that still challenge human ingenuity. The tiny spider building those immense webs doesn't know it's breaking records. It's simply surviving, using adaptations its ancestors accumulated through countless generations. But to us, looking at those record-breaking webs with the perspective of materials science and structural engineering, they represent something profound. Evidence that nature remains our most innovative engineer, and that the world still holds discoveries that can reshape our understanding of what materials can do. We began this exploration with a simple observation. Spiderwebs are everywhere, overlooked, underappreciated. We end with a deeper understanding of why these structures matter far beyond their role as insect traps. A spiderweb embodies principles that span multiple scientific disciplines. It's a materials science marvel. Protein fibers that combine strength, elasticity, and toughness in ways synthetic materials struggle to match. It's a structural engineering achievement. Architectures that distribute loads efficiently, fail gracefully, and adapt to environmental conditions. It's an acoustic instrument, a sensory organ that extends perception far beyond the spider's body. It's a sustainable manufacturing system, materials produced at room temperature from renewable resources and efficiently recycled. And it's an evolutionary success story. Solutions refined across millions of years, optimized for diverse ecological niches. The physics underlying these structures isn't separate from the biology. The spider's genes encode not just body structure, but also silk protein sequences that determine mechanical properties, and behavioral programs that generate web architectures. Genes and physics intertwine inseparably. The successful spiders, the ones surviving to reproduce, are those whose genetic programs produce webs that work according to physical laws. Natural selection becomes, in this light, a form of engineering optimization operating across evolutionary timescales. Random mutations generate variation in silk proteins and construction behaviors. Physical reality tests those variations mercilessly. Effective combinations persist and spread. Ineffective ones disappear. Over millions of generations, this process produces solutions that rival or exceed human engineering achievements. What makes this process remarkable is that it achieves sophisticated outcomes without conscious design. The spider doesn't understand tensile strength or vibration mechanics or aerodynamic forces. Yet, its web performs optimally across all these domains, because evolution has encoded successful solutions into instinct and protein structure. This raises fascinating questions about the nature of knowledge and intelligence. Is understanding necessary for problem solving, or can effective solutions arise through evolutionary processes without understanding? Spiders suggest the latter. You can solve complex physics problems through evolutionary trial and error, even if you never understand what you're doing. The practical implications continue to unfold. We've discussed biomedical applications, surgical sutures, tissue scaffolds, nerve guides. We've explored materials applications, high-performance fibers for aerospace, protective equipment, lightweight structures. We've considered sustainability benefits, biodegradable alternatives to petroleum-based synthetics. These aren't hypothetical futures. Companies are commercializing spider silk technology now, and applications will expand as production scales up. But perhaps the deepest value lies in shifting perspectives. When you next encounter a spider web, in your garden, across a trail, on a window frame, you'll see it differently. Not just a sticky trap, but a sophisticated multifunctional system. A structure informed by millions of years of evolutionary refinement. A material that pushes the boundaries of what proteins can achieve. An acoustic sensor listening to environmental vibrations. A sustainable manufacturing demonstration. The web connects disciplines that humans often separate: biology, physics, materials science, engineering, mathematics, ecology. In nature, these aren't separate subjects. They're aspects of a unified reality. The spider web succeeds precisely because it integrates all these domains seamlessly. And there's something humbling in that integration. Our advanced civilization, with all our scientific knowledge and technological capabilities, still can't fully replicate what a small spider accomplishes instinctively. We're learning, we're making progress, but we're students of a process that's been running for 400 million years. The spider webs you encounter daily represent ongoing evolutionary experiments. Selection continues. Environmental conditions change. Spider populations adapt. The webs you see today differ subtly from webs built by the same species 1,000 years ago, and they'll differ from webs built 1,000 years hence. Evolution doesn't stop. It's continuous refinement in response to changing conditions. Climate change will test spider populations' adaptive capacity. Novel environmental challenges will create selection pressures we can't fully predict. Some spider populations will adapt successfully. Others may struggle. The diversity of web architectures and silk properties across different species provides resilience. Multiple solutions to similar problems increase the likelihood that some solutions will work under new conditions. By studying how spiders and their webs respond to environmental change, we gain insights into broader evolutionary and ecological processes. These tiny arthropods and their silken structures serve as indicators, warning systems, and demonstrations of adaptation in action. The story of spiderwebs is ultimately a story about problem-solving under constraints. Limited materials, limited energy, limited cognitive capacity, yet highly effective solutions. This is precisely the challenge humanity faces: achieving our goals within planetary boundaries, using sustainable approaches, creating systems that work with natural processes rather than against them. Spiderwebs suggest a path: multifunctional designs, efficient recycling, locally adapted solutions, structures that respond to environmental conditions. These principles could inform how we design buildings, manufacture materials, create infrastructure. Biomimicry, learning from nature's solutions, isn't about copying directly. Spiderwebs work for spiders in their ecological contexts. Human structures serve different purposes, but the principles, the optimization strategies, the integration of multiple functions, these translate across scales and contexts. So the next time someone dismisses a spiderweb as simple biological waste, you'll know better. You'll recognize it as a sophisticated structure embodying advanced physics, representing millions of years of evolutionary engineering, demonstrating principles we're still learning to apply. You'll see the unexpected physics of a perfect spiderweb. If you enjoyed this exploration of how physics and biology intertwine in spiderwebs, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep examinations of the science hiding in everyday natural phenomena. Share this video with anyone who appreciates the remarkable complexity of the natural world. And perhaps most importantly, pause before destroying that next spiderweb you encounter. Take a moment to observe its geometry, appreciate its construction, acknowledge the physics at work in every thread. The spider will build another web quickly enough, but you'll have given yourself a chance to marvel at one of nature's most elegant engineering achievements. Thank you for watching.